Next, we have half an hour for our public Q&A session. First, we'll give the opportunity to students. You can ask questions based on the content of the previous lecture, as well as any topics you're interested in. Feel free to ask Khenpo your questions.
Homage to the greatly kind Guru and the Three Jewels. I am a student from the Department of Philosophy at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I have always hoped to gain a comprehensive understanding of Tathāgatagarbha, so I've looked for and read quite a few books on the subject. Since I'm in the philosophy department, most of what I've read are works by scholars in Buddhist history or Buddhist studies. They all seem to be quite literary in style. What I especially want is to hear a truly accomplished practitioner give a concise explanation of Tathāgatagarbha. I respectfully request the Guru's teaching.
As for Tathāgatagarbha, we may need to discuss it further in the future, but the most fundamental and essential points are found in several treatises. One is Maitreya Bodhisattva's Ratnagotravibhāga. In the Ratnagotravibhāga, it provides an especially detailed exposition of the exoteric view of Tathāgatagarbha. Additionally, in the Tibetan tradition, there is a master named Mipham Rinpoche. Mipham Rinpoche wrote a treatise called The Lion's Roar on Buddha Nature. In The Lion's Roar on Buddha Nature, it also discusses the principles of Tathāgatagarbha with great clarity. There is also the Jonang tradition, though it seems there is no Chinese translation for this one. The Jonang tradition's Mountain Dharma in the Mountain Dharma also actually expounds on many principles of Tathāgatagarbha. All of these are treatises of the exoteric tradition, and within these exoteric treatises, if we study them in detail, it would be very beneficial. In the Buddhist scriptures, within the Tripitaka, there is a sutra called the Tathāgatagarbha Sūtra. This sutra also discusses some profound principles of Tathāgatagarbha.
Hello, thank you very much for coming to USDC to give this lecture. My question today is mainly about how Buddhism is being promoted, because if we look around, we can see that there are very few young people present, which reflects this issue. This generation, the so-called youth of the 21st century, when it comes to Buddhism, including, more broadly, traditional culture, they are not very interested. And often we find that even though one may study Buddhism with focus, one might discover that many things are truly meaningful, but within just a few short minutes. It's very hard for young people to understand what use Buddhism actually has. For example, there's a passage in Buddhism about Hanshan asking Shide, which talks about how people should deal with insults from the outside world. Avoid them, let them be, endure them, ignore them, and after a few years, just see what happens to them. But regarding this idea, many young people in real life can't really feel it or relate to it. If they don't react to insults, they don't see what benefit it brings. Laozi also talked about a small country with few people. But in today's society, if a country doesn't have strong enough military power or isn't wealthy enough, if it's just a small country with few people and only focuses on the inner happiness of its own citizens, then such a country simply can't survive in this world. So I'd like to ask, how can we help young people, and others as well, to understand how Buddhism can be applied in a short period of time so that everyone can realize that Buddhism is actually meaningful and worth deeper study? Thank you.
This student asked a very good question. Indeed, in many places, most of those studying Buddhism nowadays are middle-aged and older people. Elderly people, because of physical and inner pressures, in the end, many of them, even without a sense of returning, also come to study it. The key issue is that young people born in the 80s and 90s, what they pursue in their hearts is, on the one hand, not Buddhism, and even consider discussions about Buddhism to be irrelevant to themselves. The most important thing for them is life itself, the urgent matters right in front of them. That's all they think about. Actually, I think on the one hand, this may require everyone's effort. We study Buddhism not in order to have one particular sect or school dominate everyone else, nor is our intention to expand or increase the influence and reach of this religion over others, nor for any political or economic purpose. It's not like that. If one uses culture as an excuse or tries to dominate in this way, I think that's unreasonable. But we are indeed Buddhists. If many young people could understand the true principles of Buddhism, they would surely gain immeasurably throughout their lives. So this kind of education, whether in universities or in any other social group, should help many who don't understand to gain understanding, and those who already do to go even deeper. I hope that many intellectuals can explore more deeply and not just stay on the surface level of Buddhism, or so-called research, so-called meditation, just staying at the literal level. That's actually not the case. We should try to dig deeper. In fact, people go through different stages. At first, there is a stage of misunderstanding, then a stage of understanding, and finally, true enlightenment or a kind of enjoyment in one's own life. If we look at our own lives, we go through many different stages with any kind of knowledge. So I hope that many young people, at first they might reject Buddhism and then go through a phase of skepticism. and finally reach a stage of understanding, which may be connected to curiosity, in the end, it seems they truly benefit from it. When people gain benefits, I think everyone is willing to accept it, because everyone wants to benefit themselves. So I really hope that everyone can work together and that we should provide a perspective that truly benefits everyone. It's not that if you come to us, we Buddhists must become this huge group. It's not like that. If our mindset and intention is genuinely to provide valuable information and to help everyone, then gradually, over time, in many of the schools I have personally visited, indeed, many people's understanding of and interest in Buddhism has made significant progress compared to before.
I'm here as a guest for this interview. I started becoming interested in Buddhism around 2004. Just now I heard you say that being interested also requires practice. After learning about its knowledge, you still need to practice. But I haven't had contact with other Buddhists before, so I'd like to ask, how should one practice? That's my question.
What are you saying? Should we practice or not, right? How should one practice? I think regarding the principles of how to practice, I just mentioned one or two books. One of them is called Words of My Perfect Teacher. As practitioners, in the very beginning, we start from understanding how rare and precious human life is. If you have this sense of rarity in your heart, anyone would be willing to practice. Once you realize you have this precious human life, you start to think, my human life, even though I'm young now, it will soon be gone. I should seize this opportunity and start practicing right away. Then you contemplate the impermanence of life. When you meditate on the impermanence of life, you wonder, what will happen to me in my next life? People have past and future lives and so on. We should begin our practice with the common preliminary practices, following a step-by-step approach. Nowadays, many people lack this sense of progression. For example, some jump straight to the highest tantric teachings or directly to Chan meditation, even though they haven't yet established the basic foundations of Buddhism. Every day they just sit there with their eyes closed. While closing your eyes may feel comfortable for a while, it doesn't necessarily eliminate your afflictions at the root. Because if we want to eradicate the seeds of affliction and ignorance, we must realize the selfless nature of emptiness, progressing step by step. Only by gradually generating and realizing wisdom in stages can we eliminate them. Therefore, some of our actions do not directly confront self-clinging and become contradictory as we have not addressed it. Without addressing it, many of our actions do not become causes for liberation. That's why I often say, when we go to temples to pay respects to the Buddha, burn incense and pray for peace. This is just a kind of action, but we can't attain liberation by relying on it. Therefore, in Tibetan region, there is a teaching called the three principal aspects of the path. The first is renunciation, the second is bodhicitta, and finally, the most fundamental is non-dual wisdom. Without this fundamental wisdom, one cannot attain liberation from samsara. Nowadays, many Buddhists only have the appearance of being Buddhist. Is there any merit in this? Yes, there is merit. But to truly attain liberation from it, one must rely on listening, contemplation, and practice.
Hello, Khenpo. Right now, when it comes to Buddhism, I'm still in a stage of being half believing, half doubting. I'm a student at this school. I'm very glad to welcome you to give a lecture. At present, regarding Buddhism, I'm still in that half believing, half doubting stage. Previously, someone tried to preach Jesus Christ to me. I really want to ask a question. That is, 2,500 years ago, Shakyamuni Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So before that, was there also a God for people back then? Who or what actually created people before that? What created humanity? I really don't know the answer to this question. My second question is, does Buddhism teach us to be free of desires and wants, or does it encourage us to strive for the things we want? For example, right now, I feel that my research isn't going very smoothly. Right now, I feel very anxious and restless, so how can I use Buddhist teachings to help myself?
First, Shakyamuni Buddha lived more than 2,500 years ago. According to Buddhism, there are the 1,000 Buddhas of the fortunate aeon. This view is different from some of the current theories in human history. On this point, we may need to study some Buddhist history, including texts like the Abhidharmakosha and so on. After that, actually, humanity has not existed for just a short period of time. Ape men, the Yuanmu man from Yunnan, or as described in the theory of evolution, it's portrayed as something very simple. But actually, it should be said that it has been a very long process. And before Shakyamuni Buddha, in the fortunate aeon, there will be 1,000 Buddhas appearing, and Shakyamuni Buddha is one of them. Among these 1,000 Buddhas, he is the fourth. Before him, there were 3 Buddhas, including Kashyapa Buddha. All 3 Buddhas have already come to this world, turned the wheel of Dharma, and manifested parinirvana. So the origin of humanity actually dates back to a very early time. Many historians today also have their own explanations regarding the origin of humanity, including findings from archaeology and related fields. However, in Buddhism, there are some very reliable historical accounts. So it's not the case that humanity was discovered starting from that point. It's not like that. The second question, in Buddhism, when we recite the Buddha's name and pray to the Buddha, it truly does have an effect on you. But is it the case that everything can be accomplished just by praying to the Buddha? No, it's not. It's like when we go to the doctor, some illnesses can be treated in the hospital while others cannot be cured. So praying to the Buddha does not solve absolutely everything. Because we also have to acknowledge certain causes from our past lives. Some people wonder, why doesn't it work when I pray? Actually, when we see a doctor for some illnesses, it really does work. So you need to see a doctor. There are some illnesses that can't be helped even after seeing a doctor, but should you still go? Yes, you should. Therefore, when we pray for some of the difficulties in our lives, praying to the Buddha does indeed give you strength and has an effect. But whether everything can be resolved depends on each person's karma and conditions. It depends on the karma from past lives and many other especially complex conditions. Therefore, this also depends on one's own fortune and has a certain relationship with it.
Hello, Khenpo. I am also a student at the University of Science and Technology. I have 2 questions for you. I think everyone here, they should all be interested with Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan culture.
What department are you in?
I am currently studying at the prestigious business school, actually very interested in Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhism. I have personally taken Professor Huang's courses on Buddhism. One question I want to ask you is, in this day and age, I think, because everyone really wants to go to Tibetan region, Tibetan society is also becoming more and more complex. It won't be as simple as it used to be, with just a single unified culture. In such an increasingly complex era, how do you think we should protect and pass on Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhism?
Thank you. First, I would say as technology becomes more and more advanced nowadays, has the development of technology had any negative impact on Tibetan culture, including Buddhist and traditional culture? Indeed, it has also been affected to some extent by the influence of Western culture. This is undeniable. However, in recent years, or rather in this short period of time, we may not have become aware of any particularly major problems because generally much of Tibetan culture is carefully preserved and maintained within monasteries. And now, apart from a few large open monasteries, a significant number of ancient monasteries are still preserved deep in the remote mountains. Within these monasteries, whether it's cultural relics or scholars, many of the geshes and khenpos who are like university professors, as we often say, and many highly respected elders have continued to reside there. Moreover, Tibetan region places special emphasis on the study of Buddhist teachings, and in many places people are studying to varying degrees. For many adults, the Dharma is regarded as a wish-fulfilling jewel in their hearts. Because of this, these traditions may not be so easily changed. Of course, there are also some Tibetan university students who go to inland or study abroad. Their faith and emphasis on traditional culture in their hearts is gradually fading and slowly disappearing from our lives. This trend, unfortunately, also exists. So, how do we protect it? On one hand, we sincerely hope that the new generation will truly understand and appreciate the value and importance of culture. Many Tibetans now, in particular, especially admire the Han regions. They all feel that the celebrities in the Han regions, the way they style their hair, the clothes they wear, many young people in Tibetan areas are just like how back in the 1970s and 80s, Chinese people looked up to America. They are extremely envious. Now, many people in the Han regions might also have some admiration for Western lifestyles, but people in the West, on the contrary, have their eyes fixed on our Tibetan plateau, its grasslands, culture, and Buddhist studies. It's like this as well. Things are always slowly circulating and changing. I think in the end, people from Tibetan region will still return home. After going from the Han regions to the West, when they finally return to their own place, they may not know whether their mother is still there or not.
Hello, I am a student from the School of Engineering at USTC. I read in your book that the essence of Buddhism lies in great compassion and wisdom. I'd like to ask you, is great compassion what you were referring to? Great compassion, bodhicitta, a sense of mercy and empathy? Then what exactly is wisdom? Is it our way of viewing the world, or is it something else?
In Buddhism, there are 2 different kinds of wisdom. One type is the wisdom to truly and fully accept the truth and to make thoughtful choices in the world. Nowadays, in many universities, it is often the case that people who do not have wisdom may find it difficult to get a job. This is also a kind of truth advocated in Buddhism, but the most fundamental is to fully realize the true nature of all things, this kind of complete enlightenment. We often say, I now understand, but I have not attained enlightenment. The wisdom realized through enlightenment is the deepest and highest wisdom advocated in Buddhism.
First of all, I am very grateful to Khenpo for giving us this teaching. My question is, just now, Khenpo mentioned the challenges posed by science. These have brought some challenges that religions must face. You mentioned the issue of evolution theory. What I want to know is, since Christianity begins with the book of Genesis, there is a major contradiction between it and our theory of evolution. So how does Buddhism view the theory of evolution? If the theory of evolution happens to align with what Buddhism teaches, that it is the result of the collective and individual karma of sentient beings coming together through various causes and conditions, then how does karma actually function behind the scenes to produce this effect? Now, as we see, science continues to advance. Is humanity, as we say, truly progressing? That's the first question. The second question is, what I want to know is, as the previous student just mentioned, issues like Maitreya's descent and the faith in Maitreya Buddha. For us ordinary young people, it's much easier to be drawn to those aspects of Buddhism, such as the Four Noble Truths and the 12 links of dependent origination from early original Buddhism, as well as later concepts like emptiness and the wondrous existence of true emptiness. These philosophical ideas are very appealing to young people. But we don't really want to read its scriptures because we feel that, for example, this Buddha or that Buddha all seem very distant from us. We don't feel like they're real things to us. So I'd like to ask the Venerable for some guidance on this.
First, regarding the issue of evolution in actuality, as for Buddhism, if it were really as simple as what evolution says, I often think, including if the founder were still here today, even he himself would not be able to explain the various different karmas of sentient beings and the many real-life cases that keep emerging in today's society. This is something that even Darwin himself, when he was alive, could not explain in many instances. Precisely because of this nowadays, I once read that there are now 500 scientists in the United States who have signed their names to begin refuting the theory of evolution. And there are certain reasons for this as well. Of course, the perspectives of Christianity and Buddhism when facing evolution, there are some aspects that are the same and some that are different. But I think when it comes to evolution, Buddhism doesn't really need a lot of explanation. Every sentient being, whether their experience is suffering or happiness, has different karmic results in these matters. If things were really as simple as they say, then perhaps everyone in this society, including their perspectives, would be extremely short-sighted. And also, because of evolution, it has indeed caused some harm to many people's thinking, values, and certain beliefs. It has had a certain negative impact as well. Buddhism believes that the good and evil in people arise from many complex causes and conditions. Most fundamentally, whatever kind of cause you plant, that is the kind of result you will get. Just like when we plant poison, we get poisonous results. If you plant a miraculous medicine, you get its corresponding result. So, whatever kind of seed you plant, that is the kind of result you will get. For example, the issues that arise among siblings are all different from one another. Even though their parents are exactly the same, their jobs, their circumstances, and even their troubles are all different from each other. All of these are not the same. So in these aspects, one may need to delve deeper into some Buddhist scriptures and phenomena to truly understand. As for the second question, just now I also mentioned why I advocate for this. Young people today must not simply rely on faith alone. Actually, our Buddhism is not like believing in a deity. From one perspective, Shakyamuni Buddha is not a god. He truly came to this world over 2,500 years ago. And the Dharma he turned is just like what ordinary people do in this world. All of his works are in written form. So many countries around the world are studying them. Therefore, there is a certain difference between him and a god. Whether it's the 12 links of dependent origination or the Four Noble Truths, these principles, as young people, you must study them in depth. After delving deeply, you will come to understand their true meaning. At the same time, as young people, you also shouldn't deny the so-called Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Some may think these are just gods or a form of superstition. This kind of thinking is completely unreasonable. Why is that? They truly possess exceptionally high realization and states of attainment. Moreover, the stories from Chan Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, as well as the biographies of great monks and accomplished masters around the world, truly describe states that ordinary people simply cannot compare to. In the same way, in this world, there really are bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara and Maitreya. If we regard them as just some kind of deity or like spirits, that perspective is extremely unscientific. Why is that? Because we haven't truly understood them. If we haven't understood them, it has something to do with our own beliefs or environment. This is understandable. But we should still treat this as a real and legitimate subject to study and analyze thoroughly so that we can arrive at a genuine conclusion.
Khenpo, hello. I am a staff member in the finance department at the University of Science and Technology. My question is this. For example, in a big city like Hong Kong, a large metropolis, everyone is extremely busy, making a lot of money. But for them, since they're so busy, is there any advice you can give on how to deal with their afflictions? Because as you know, busy people or those who make a lot of money, of course, they also have their own troubles. Perhaps in a big city like Hong Kong, more people have wealth, they live very comfortably, and their transportation is extremely convenient. But for them, how can they deal with the afflictions in their hearts? That's my question. Thank you.
I think that dealing with afflictions is indeed not very easy, but it's not just Hong Kong. Nowadays, people in major cities on the mainland are indeed getting busier and busier. Not to mention anything else, just answering phone calls every day is already causing problems for their ears. Many people are now in this kind of state. So at this time, we find that it's quite difficult to completely eliminate the afflictions of all beings. But I think it's really best for everyone to calmly and carefully take a look at themselves, perhaps even pausing to reflect for a moment. Take a look at what you're doing. Many people have already lost themselves. And as for the money they earn, for some people it's basically, now the gap between rich and poor is especially large. For some, their wealth is nothing more than a number in a bank account. Yet they still keep themselves endlessly busy. In the midst of all this busyness, their short lives have already slipped away. Some people do it for enjoyment. Many people in cities nowadays are rather aimless. Sometimes when I'm in the city I see, but after returning to the mountains, returning to the monastery, there's an indescribable feeling. It's truly a return to nature. A person's wealth doesn't necessarily come from the happiness that money brings. True wealth is inner abundance. This is what Buddhism refers to as contentment brings constant happiness, having a contented heart. Of course, if you lack the basics for living, that's also a kind of suffering. But nowadays, many people are perhaps the least content of all, constantly expanding this kind of state. At this point, the only solution is to be content and reduce desires. This is something in Buddhism. Everyone just follows their own causes and conditions. If you have the conditions to earn more money, that's fine too. But with the extra money you earn, you should remember that there are still many people around us who can't even afford to eat, including neighboring countries like Egypt, Africa. There are so many people there as well. But many wealthy people simply don't want to donate or help them at all. There are also many people around us like this who don't want to help either. So these are all very common situations. Now there's a kind of illusory virtual virus that keeps infecting people's minds. If we don't calmly quiet our minds and observe ourselves, on the surface, you may look like an intellectual. But in reality, sometimes we humans are indeed quite ignorant and foolish. Therefore, everyone should go with the flow or try to be content with less and have fewer desires. But we also need to face things proactively. We can't just leave everything to fate, saying, I don't care, it's all predestined. This kind of attitude is also not recognized in Buddhism. We should do the work that needs to be done and say what needs to be said, but at the same time, we should maintain a sense of contentment and go with the flow, desiring less.
Hello, Khenpo. Thank you for coming to give this talk. I am a student from the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I think many of my classmates are probably similar to me. We've come across many Buddhist stories and have also heard people talk about many Buddhist teachings. But when it comes to some basic concepts of Buddhism, we don't have a very deep understanding. For example, there are two pairs of opposing concepts in Buddhism. One is appearance, the other is mind, isn't that right? The other is form, the other is emptiness. The basic principles of these two pairs of concepts, I hope the Khenpo can explain this thoroughly to all of us in detail, because like what we hear some say form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The saying, your appearance reflects your heart. then we think since form is emptiness and emptiness is form. For example, as you just mentioned, we need to have compassion. We should have compassion for animals and compassion for ants. To me, an ant is an appearance. So is this form also emptiness? Since I am dealing with something that is empty, why should there still be a distinction between compassion and malice? And is my compassion or malice itself also something empty? Why should we be so attached to this matter? Could the Dharma teacher please explain this? Thank you.
Regarding this question, as I just mentioned, it would be easier if one has a comprehensive understanding of Buddhism. Whether it's form is emptiness, emptiness is form, or the principle that appearances arise from the mind, the principle of form is emptiness, involves the fundamental ideas of the Madhyamaka school. At this point, I have previously lectured on the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra specifically explains this section as well. Actually, during the process of analysis, some people say this form refers to the things we see with our eyes. They are of the nature of emptiness. This emptiness is something our eyes can directly perceive. This can be inferred in the Madhyamaka school. From what perspective is this? When discerning emptiness, that is, when discerning the realization of bodhisattvas and Buddhas, or when discerning the true nature of all phenomena, form and emptiness are not two separate things. They are inseparable. It should be understood this way. But as for deluded appearances, in terms of worldly phenomena, then form is not emptiness and emptiness is not form. They are at different levels, whether it's Einstein's theory of relativity or quantum mechanics. When you observe a bottle, the bottle that appears in the realm of illusion, it cannot possibly be molecules, quarks, or subquarks. At this time, am I seeing subquarks with my eyes? No, this is a bottle. What I see with my eyes is a sentient being. Although the true nature of sentient beings is emptiness, before I understand this, I should recognize that this is the world of sentient beings, and sentient beings experience suffering and happiness. In appearances, I can't just say, because this is subquarks, I throw the bottle here, then in your perception, this bottle no longer exists. This is a comparison between appearance and reality. If someone says, since the bottle is made up of subquarks, then if I can't see subquarks with my eyes, how can I see the bottle? These are two different concepts, two different levels. So apparent reality and ultimate reality cannot be mixed together. This is the meaning of form is emptiness, emptiness is form. We say that appearances arise from the mind. This is the view of the Yogacara school. Actually, whether it's the external world or all phenomena, it's like dreaming. If you truly understand the concept that all phenomena arise from the mind, it's easy to grasp its meaning by using dreams as an analogy. At this point, all phenomena are generated by my own mind. But to understand this, you need to grasp some of the principles in the 20 or 30 verses of Yogacara. Among them is the teaching that all phenomena arise solely from the mind. As stated in the Shurangama Sutra, all phenomena arise from the mind. Only when the mind is confused by ignorance do things and phenomena appear. Here we follow Yogacara philosophy. Are there external objects? Yes, but they are illusions created by the mind's confusion. At this time, we need to study the viewpoint of Yogacara philosophy. Therefore, these two should be understood from different perspectives. And only after doing so will you know in which situations everything. Nowadays, many people who know a little about Buddhism, some people know a little bit about physics, but when they haven't really studied it. I saw a report some time ago that talked about Buddhism and the scientific spirit. In it, it discussed why science is widely accepted by people. There are 3 reasons for this. Similarly, for Buddhism to be accepted by people, there are also 3 reasons. But if someone doesn't understand it and tries to judge science, they often reveal many, many flaws in front of scientists. So this issue probably needs to be studied more deeply.
Hello, I'm from the School of Science at the University of Science and Technology. I'd like to ask you, Buddhism talks about the cycle of birth and death and karma. I'd like to know your thoughts on this. Also, Buddhists often say that everyone has their own fate and that things cannot be forced. Since I was a child, I've been educated in materialism, and I believe that destiny is in our own hands. So, do you think that fate truly exists? I'd like to hear your thoughts. What is your perspective on this?
I think whether it's Buddhism's ideas of past and present lives, or karma, or the questions about humanity and the ultimate destruction of our lives, these are things that can't really be truly or adequately described in just a few words. As for some of these issues, I have shared my views on different occasions in the past. But the most fundamental issue is, in fact, it's not just that Buddhism acknowledges past and future lives and the law of karma. We should say that what we cannot deny now is that even in the scientific community, In the globally recognized scientific circles, they also acknowledge the existence of past and future lives. And even among those outside the scientific community and among many people without any religious beliefs, many people are now fully able to accept this idea, or, in other words, the existence of past and future lives is becoming clear to them. Not long ago, I learned about Dr. Jim Tucker, who is an American scientist. Recently, in the United States, collected over 1,000 cases regarding the existence of past and future lives in America. Previously, Dr. Stevenson, the renowned researcher in Europe and in the East, had collected many cases of the existence of past and future lives. So these differences are simply due to our environment and the different education we received from materialism in the past. However, materialism does not have any truly strong evidence to claim that past and future lives do not exist. They have not provided any reasons for their non-existence. It's just that they haven't advocated for it in this context. Therefore, we should understand that this principle is actually well-founded. Moreover, there is no sufficient basis to say that past and future lives do not exist. In this way, I understand the existence of past and future lives and the relationship of karma and cause and effect. In the future, our lives are not going to end as quickly as we might imagine. It continues on with samsara being boundless and endless. Only when you truly attain the fundamental wisdom that eradicates self-clinging can you then cut through it. In fact, these are especially necessary. In ancient India, there was a master named Aryadeva. In his 400 verses on the middle way, he also said that for some of the more hidden aspects of Buddhism, you must study emptiness. Through studying the wisdom of Buddhism, you can gain access to them. Because the wisdom of Buddhism is not simply about stating a theory. It's not about saying you must believe no matter what. There's no such thing. You can analyze it yourself. And in the process of analysis, just like in Tibetan Buddhism, where debates are held every day, for a single question, such as the existence of past and future lives, it can take at least several months of debate. In the end, when no one has any more arguments, then you have no choice but to admit it, then I accept it. This often happens, so I have no choice but to admit it because you have sufficient evidence and I do not. If I don't have it, then even from a theoretical standpoint, I have no choice but to admit it now. So for many issues, Buddhism should be, especially within Buddhism, it's possible to improve one's genuine understanding through observation, questioning, and debate. That kind of approach is very necessary for deepening real understanding.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a student from the School of Humanities at the University of Science and Technology. While listening to your lectures and reading the books you have translated, I have a certain feeling, though I'm not sure if this feeling is correct. You are facilitating communication and exchange between Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, including both Vajrayana and Sutrayana traditions. You are engaging in dialogue and exchange between these traditions. I would like to know what circumstances or motivations led you to do this. What made you decide to take on this task? Also, between different schools and different regions, I think the understanding of the Dharma may differ. Have you ever encountered resistance or opposition from others? How do you reconcile the conflicts between them? Thank you.
I think as for these causes and conditions, all phenomena arise from causes and conditions. All phenomena cease due to causes and conditions. Such is the teaching of the great Shramana. Generally, only the Buddha truly knows the profound causes and conditions. For example, why the people present today are here, or what causes and conditions led you to study at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Even if you asked a scientist, even if Einstein himself stood up, he might not be able to immediately explain what those causes and conditions are. But I believe that this time, no matter where I am, if I were to speak from the perspective of Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, I personally feel that this is about forming a positive connection with everyone. It's also a kind of exchange. I consider myself in a way also a student. I often say that I do not possess the qualifications to be a teacher, because I don't even meet the requirements of a qualified student. So when others call me a teacher or refer to me as Khenpo, I feel a sense of shame in my heart. I've never thought of myself as being particularly remarkable. I've never thought that way, but deep down I do think Buddhism is so wonderful and people need it so much nowadays. Even as science becomes more and more advanced, just as Master Taishu once said, the more science develops, the more the true meaning of Buddhism becomes apparent. So I think that as science continues to advance, what our hearts truly need most is the wisdom and compassion found in Buddhism. And Buddhism often brings benefit to many people, especially the younger generation. If in the future there is no restraint from Buddhism, I'm very worried that even more frightening social unrest and all sorts of issues may arise. I'm also concerned that individuals might sometimes engage in extremism. Although I can't do much, I do have a small sense of mission. It's also a way of being responsible to everyone. At the same time, I personally enjoy especially interacting and connecting with young people and those who are wise. I myself have also learned a lot, both worldly and transcendent knowledge. And in this process, your second question is whether others have ever attacked me. There have been such cases, and sometimes I'm willing to accept it. If my views are wrong, then I can't just stubbornly cling to them. I should respectfully accept criticism from others. This is a fundamental attitude in Buddhist dialectical thinking. If others cannot present a real argument against me, I should still face it with a confident and positive attitude no matter what. So usually, in any situation, if someone publicly points out my faults or starts talking about my shortcomings in various aspects, I can say that I don't get angry. I think that nowadays, whether as a Buddhist or as any university student in the world, one should have a very open, very free, and widely accepted mindset to communicate with each other. This is a kind of enjoyment. It is not an attack between people. You know, actually, when it comes to the concept of truth, the famous scientist Galileo once said, "The more that truth is attacked or challenged, the more its true and fundamental nature, its very essence, is gradually revealed to us." The so-called truth, the more it is attacked, the more its true nature is revealed. So I think for those who actively seek the truth, truly being attacked is an opportunity and also the best kind of challenge. Through this, one can reflect on oneself and search within. It is also truly the best and most meaningful kind of contribution that one can genuinely offer to each and every person.